In 1191, monks at Glastonbury Abbey made a shocking discovery: a grave containing two bodies and a lead cross inscribed, "Here lies buried the renowned King Arthur in the Isle of Avalon." The proof? The unusual depth of the burial, ancient artifacts surrounding the remains, and the strategic timing after a devastating fire that nearly bankrupted the abbey. But what if this convenient discovery wasn't just medieval fundraising, but a clue to something far more profound? Welcome, mystery hunters. Today we're tracking one of history's most enduring enigmas, Avalon, the mist-shrouded island where Excalibur was forged, where 9 mysterious priestesses ruled, and where, legend tells us, Arthur was taken to heal from mortal wounds that should have claimed his life. A place between worlds that has captivated imaginations for 15 centuries. The first written mention of Avalon appears in Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britannia around 1136, describing it as Insula Avalonis, an island abundant with apples, where Arthur was taken after the catastrophic Battle of Camlan. The name itself whispers secrets, derived from the Celtic word abal, or Welsh afal, meaning apple, connecting it to ancient Celtic paradise myths where magical fruits granted immortality. But what makes this legend particularly fascinating is how it weaves together historical threads with mystical elements. The historical Arthur, if he existed, would have lived during the tumultuous 5th-6th centuries as Roman Britain collapsed and Saxon invaders pressed from the east. This period, aptly called the Dark Ages, left few reliable records, creating the perfect conditions for a historical figure to evolve into something more. Picture the landscape of post-Roman Britain, crumbling villas, abandoned towns, and a population caught between fading Roman ways and resurgent Celtic traditions. In this crucible of cultural transformation, the boundaries between history and myth dissolved like morning mist. What if Avalon represented not just a physical place, but this liminal moment in British history, when the old world was dying, and a new one struggled to be born? The Arthurian legends evolved dramatically over centuries. By the 12th century, French poet Chrétien de Troyes introduced the Holy Grail and courtly romance elements. Later, Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur cemented the version most familiar today. In these medieval retellings, Avalon transformed from a simple healing place to a realm of magic and mystery, ruled by Morgan Le Fay and her sisterhood of enchantresses. Glastonbury, with its prominent tor rising dramatically from the Somerset levels, became increasingly associated with Avalon during the medieval period. Imagine standing at its base, watching mist swirl around the tower-topped hill, transforming the surrounding landscape into a temporary island in a sea of white. The monks of Glastonbury Abbey certainly recognized this visual connection and, perhaps, exploited it masterfully with their convenient discovery of Arthur's remains. What's particularly intriguing is how the landscape itself seems to validate aspects of the legend. Until the 12th century, Glastonbury was indeed surrounded by marshlands, forming an actual island during floods. Archaeological evidence confirms it was a significant pre-Christian site, with artifacts dating back to Neolithic times. The tor itself features a mysterious terraced labyrinth pattern that some researchers believe represents an ancient ceremonial pathway, a physical manifestation of the journey between worlds that Avalon symbolizes. But the mystery deepens when we consider the curious astronomical alignments. The Glastonbury zodiac, first identified by Catherine Maltwood in the 1920s, suggests the landscape around the tor forms an enormous celestial map, with earthworks and natural features creating zodiacal figures. Could our ancestors have recognized something special about this location, something that transcended the physical world and connected to cosmic patterns? In ancient days, Avalon was called the Isle of Glass, writes medieval chronicler Gerald of Wales. This curious name, Innis Witrin in Celtic, suggests transparency, a thinness between worlds. What if our ancestors sensed something we've forgotten, that certain places serve as thresholds where the veil between material and spiritual realms grows permeable? But what if Avalon was never meant to be found on any physical map? The true revelation emerges when we look beyond geography to the symbolic dimensions hidden in plain sight. Consider this startling possibility. Avalon represents not just a mystical island, but an entire metaphysical framework for understanding reality itself. The ancient Celtic priesthood, the Druids, viewed apples as symbols of immortality and transcendent knowledge. When cut horizontally, the apple reveals a perfect pentagram, a sacred geometry pattern representing the 5 elements and cosmic harmony. As above, so below, states the Hermetic axiom that would later influence medieval mysticism. Could Avalon, the Isle of Apples, actually represent a state of consciousness rather than a physical location? This interpretation gains astonishing credibility when we examine the philosophical currents flowing beneath medieval Britain. By the 12th century, Neoplatonic ideas had infiltrated European thought through Arabic translations and mystical Christian traditions. Plotinus, the 3rd century philosopher, described the world soul, anima mundi, as the spiritual essence permeating all creation, connecting the material world to divine reality. In this light, Morgan Le Fay and her 9 priestesses take on profound significance. 9 is the number of completion in many mystical traditions, representing the fullness of spiritual attainment. These women weren't merely enchantresses, but guardians of the threshold between worlds, spiritual midwives guiding souls between material existence and higher realms of being. What if, as medieval mystic Hildegard of Bingen might ask, the true Avalon lies not across the sea, but within the human heart? The journey to Avalon mirrors the soul's ascent in Neoplatonic thought, moving from the material world, represented by Arthur's battlefield, through purification, the voyage across water, to illumination, healing on the sacred island. The Grail legends that later intertwined with Arthurian tales reinforce this interpretation. The Grail, variously described as a cup, stone, or dish, represents the vessel of divine essence, the point where spirit infuses matter. The kingdom of heaven is within you, states the Gospel of Luke, a passage medieval mystics interpreted as revealing the immanent divine presence accessible through contemplation. This explains why Avalon remains eternally elusive, despite centuries of searching. Like the philosopher's stone of alchemical tradition, it exists simultaneously as both metaphor and reality, a state of consciousness that transforms the seeker. As 13th century poet Wolfram von Eschenbach suggests in his Grail romance, Parzival, the Grail is a stone of the most marvelous kind called lapsit exilis. This cryptic phrase, possibly derived from lapis ex calis, stone from heaven, or lapsit ex calis, it fell from heaven, points to the divine spark within material, reality, the most mind-bending possibility. Our ancestors encoded profound metaphysical truths in narrative form, creating stories that functioned simultaneously as entertainment, cultural memory, and initiatory wisdom. Myth is much more important and true than history, Aristotle observed. History tells us what happened, but myth tells us what happens. This metaphysical interpretation of Avalon illuminates why the legend has endured with such power across centuries. It speaks to something universal in human experience, the intuition that reality extends beyond what our physical senses perceive. As Shakespeare's Hamlet reminds us, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Modern visitors to Glastonbury often report unusual experiences, altered states of consciousness, vivid dreams, and synchronicities that defy rational explanation. The red and white springs that emerge at the base of the Tor contain water with distinctly different mineral compositions, one leaving red iron deposits symbolizing the physical world, the other clear and calcifying, representing spiritual purification. These waters literally transform the landscape, just as the metaphorical waters of Avalon transform consciousness. What if these experiences aren't merely subjective, but glimpses of what medieval mystics understood intuitively? The 12th century Cistercian monks who established themselves at Glastonbury may have recognized what indigenous cultures worldwide have long maintained, that certain places serve as natural sanctuaries where the boundary between material and spiritual dimensions grows thin. Perhaps the most profound aspect of the Avalon mystery is how it continues to evolve. Each generation reinterprets the legend, according to its own spiritual needs and understanding. From medieval Christians who saw it as a type of earthly paradise to modern neo-pagans who view it as a center of goddess worship, Avalon functions as what Carl Jung would call a living archetype, a pattern in the collective unconscious that adapts while maintaining its essential nature. The true power of Avalon may lie not in finding its geographical location, but in recognizing how it represents the eternal human quest for meaning beyond materiality. As T.S. Eliot wrote in Little Gidding, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." So where does our hunt for Avalon lead us? Perhaps to the recognition that the mist-shrouded isle exists in that liminal space between history and myth, between matter and spirit, not as a place to be discovered, but as a journey to be undertaken. The true Avalon may be that state of awareness where, like Arthur himself, we transcend our wounds and limitations to glimpse something eternal. Love this journey through the mists of Avalon? Hit subscribe for more mysteries that challenge the boundaries between history and myth. And that's our hunt for now, a wild mix of documented history and tantalizing what-ifs based on bibliographical sources. What ancient mystery should we explore next?